Okay, so we're still going to give people another minute or two to come in to the session. It is going to be recorded and the slides will be shared in the future. And it will be shared for each of the upcoming webinars as well. So you have access to it even if you're not able to attend some of the sessions, but hopefully you'll be able to attend in person so we can help answer questions as well as we go for what we're able to answer. All right, so I do see we are getting some responses for the question, what do you think of when you hear the phrase artificial intelligence? And I'm seeing some science fiction in there, surreal, all our jobs will be in jeopardy. That is some fears. Personally, I don't foresee that, but things may have to change a little bit. So we'll talk about some of that as well. So we'll give people just another minute to come in, but if you are here and are willing, I have a couple other questions for you to fill out in the chat if you are feeling like participating. The next question is, have you used any AI or artificial intelligence? And if so, which tools have you used? If you want to share that in the chat, go ahead and do so while we're waiting for others to join. Okay, Alexa, that's a good example of AI, yes. And I'm not sure what copy AI is, Daniel, but I'd like to hear more about that down the road. Grammarly, that would be another one. Yep, and I know Jeff has started using several different tools as well, including ChatGPT, Quillbot, and Grammarly. Good. So I think we're probably all familiar with at least some artificial intelligence, whether it's Alexa or Siri or something along those lines, to ChatGPT or some of the newer tools that are coming out. And so we'll talk about some of that today. And it is 12:01 on my phone, so we'll give people just one more minute to come in. So if you do want to share an answer to another question, one final question, have any of you ever used ChatGPT? And I know a couple of you have said that in the chat already, but I'm curious if any of you have actually used it, because we'll talk about that today since I know that's a hot topic at this point in time. And I'll give you just a moment to answer that question if you're so inclined. And then I will go ahead and get started with my presentation. And I will leave time for questions if you have any after I'm done going through things. I'll try to answer questions as they come up during the session, but I may have to close the chat so I can see my screen and my slides better. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So for those that may not know me yet, my name is Brianne Kirsch. I am the university librarian here. And today's presentation is going to be about artificial intelligence, the definition and types. So here's an agenda for today's session. There's a lot here, and I will be talking about a lot of different things quickly, but I do want to give a broad overview of what AI is and what's included in generative AI specifically. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll try to have time to show you some of these, at least two of the tools as well when we're done. And of course, as a librarian, I have to share some resources also. So first, I'll talk about what is generative AI as opposed to discriminative AI. And then I'll talk about some of the types of AI and specifically generative AI that are out there right now, including chatbots, image generation and synthesis, research, music generation and composition, video creation, and more. So first, what is generative AI? I'm going to pause here and see if any of you have a guess or what you think generative AI might be. So if you feel like participating and want to type into the chat what you think of when you hear the phrase generative AI or generative artificial intelligence, feel free to go ahead and type that in the chat. And if you're not sure what it is, that's okay. We'll talk about it in a moment. And I see we're getting a few more people coming in. And for those that are coming in after we started already, I am recording this session. So if you want to check back in the earlier part of the presentation, you are welcome to do that so in the recording later on. All right, so I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet for what is generative AI. Oh, I see one now. Generative creates content usually based on a prompt. Jeff, that's a great short definition for generative AI. So well done. I'm glad that you're helping me with some of the other presentations since you've learned quite a bit about it too, as I can imagine going through some of the resources we've looked at together. So anybody else have thoughts on generative AI before I move on? What about discriminative AI? Does anybody know what that is? I'm always curious to see what people know before I talk about things, because there are some other experts out here that might already be familiar with much of this. I myself am still learning. I've attended a number of webinars on AI and have read some articles. There's so much out there about it though, so there's more to learn for me as well. All right, so let's move on. So here's a definition of generative AI. It's a type of artificial intelligence that creates new data such as images, text, and music based on patterns found in existing data. It works by learning the underlying structure of the data and then using that structure to generate new content. Unlike discriminative AI, which focuses on classifying or labeling data, generative AI creates new data that didn't exist before. So in a nutshell, as Jeff said, it generates content, usually based on a prompt. So another way of looking at this and another definition is available from ChatGPT. So here's the definition according to ChatGPT and some of the differences. Discriminative and generative AI are two different types of machine learning models. And that might sound scary to you. If you're not familiar with AI, it's actually not too big of a deal. It just means essentially that a discriminative model learns to distinguish between different classes of data or information. It takes in input data, such as a prompt, and produces a classification or prediction based on the features of the data. And discriminative models are used for tasks like image classification, speech recognition, and sentiment analysis. And that is used in things like surveillance or security systems, among other things. And on the other hand, a generative model learns to generate new data that's similar to the data that it was trained on. So it's trained on a set of data or information and learns the underlying distribution of the data. Then it can generate new data or information similar to what it was trained on. So this can include things like image and text generation, speech synthesis, and anomaly detection. And that is used for generating new content. So that's the gist. We're focusing on the tools that generate new content. All right, so jumping into the types of generative AI. There's a lot out there and more is being created, but here are just a few of what's available and some of the different types. So under chatbots, we have ChatGPT, probably the most popular right now, and Perplexity. And I'll talk a little bit about each of those tools briefly and compare them. Then we've got image generation and synthesis tools like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and Night Cafe. For research tools, we have Elicit. And of course, I have to spend a little time on that as a librarian. Then we've got music generation and composition tools, including Ava, Soundful, and Murph.ai. And I'm just going to show briefly Ava, since I'm less familiar with these music tools. Then we've got video ones like Gen 2 Runway, which I'll talk briefly about, but won't delve into very much. And there are others like Slide GPT, which helps create a slideshow for you. I did not use that for this presentation, but it is there. And then there are coding AI tools like OpenAI Codex and Code T5. And then finally, things like Tab 9, which has to do with, I believe, drug discovery and design. So there's a lot of interesting things being created with AI. So let's jump right in. First, what is ChatGPT? Well, according to OpenAI, the company that created ChatGPT, it's trained to interact in a conversational way. So this dialogue format makes it possible to answer questions and follow-up questions and challenge incorrect premises and reject inappropriate requests, though it's not infallible. And later on, it talks about how it's an AI text classifier, which can be helpful. There are classifiers or detection tools which can be helpful to detect content created by ChatGPT, but they are, again, not foolproof. So there are false positives in some of these detection tools that think of human written content as AI generated. So if you're trying to use these detection tools, know that they're not 100% accurate. Yes, they will improve with time, but so will ChatGPT, supposedly. We'll see what happens. And then finally, even on the OpenAI website, the creators of ChatGPT says, sometimes the model will offer an argument that doesn't make sense or is wrong. Other times it may fabricate source names, direct quotations, citations, and other details. So even the creators know that it creates false information sometimes. It does its best to answer questions, but sometimes it won't know an answer and it'll just make up stuff. So that's something to keep in mind and make students aware of if they're deciding to use these tools. So one of the things to point out to students is that they'll need to know how to evaluate the trustworthiness of information by using external reliable sources. So have them come talk to their librarian if they need help with that. All right, so a little bit more about ChatGPT. As you may know, it's popular right now with students. It can be used to provide study support for students by creating practice questions related to content, summarizing technical articles, explaining theories or content in easier language, such as high school or elementary level. It can be used for brainstorming, and it can also help English as a second language students with language barriers. So those are some of the helpful things that ChatGPT can be used for by our students. But as you can probably imagine, it can also be used for cheating. So you can ask it to answer discussion board questions. You could have it write a short essay based on a prompt, and some of the results are pretty accurate, but it doesn't share where it got that information. So students would still have to go in and find sources to cite so they wouldn't be caught plagiarizing, even if they used a ChatGPT essay that they wrote. So, and of course, it's important to realize the challenges, the hallucinations. ChatGPT does make up stuff, and like I mentioned earlier, it does not cite sources. So there's a lot of text on this screen. It is not UDL friendly, but I did want to show an example. So this was a prompt I put in for ChatGPT. Can you write an essay about information literacy? And it gave me a 5-paragraph essay, and it's fairly accurate. So as you can see, it is possible to just ask it to do your homework for you, yes. But how reliable and valid is it and accurate? That's something that students will have to evaluate and edit for accuracy, and then also find sources to back up what it's saying. So I want to move on to Perplexity. I know there's probably a lot of questions about ChatGPT. There will be time later, hopefully, and then we can delve into some of those. But for now, this is Perplexity. And according to Perplexity, it is an AI language model, and it's a computer program designed to process and generate human language. And in this case, the nice thing about Perplexity, it's not as dialogue focused as ChatGPT, but it provides sources where it got the information from. So in this case, you can see at the bottom of the screen, it says 4 sources, including Stack Exchange, Psychology Today, YouTube, and Glamour. So maybe not the most reliable and scholarly of sources, but it does give you what sources it's using. And another example, I gave it the prompt, how can I make library services more inclusive in higher education? And it gives me a nice result here, and it cites its sources from Association of Research Libraries, Valencia College, the American Library Association, and Louisiana State University. So some more reliable sources based on my question. So if students want to use a tool, an AI generative tool, I would recommend Perplexity because at least that gives you the sources. All right, so let's move on from the chat bots and move on to pictures and image generation tools. I'm going to focus on Night Cafe since that's the one I'm most familiar with. So essentially, Night Cafe creates images based on text prompts. There also is an option, I believe, to include an image as a starting point for it to create other things from. So for this example, I used the prompt photorealistic college students and professor working on a project in the library. And it brought up these 4 images using the stable diffusion option. So if you look in real close, I know they're kind of small on the screen. The faces are not very clear on the humans that they've included, but it's a good starting point for images. So it's kind of interesting seeing what it can create from prompts. So moving on to Elicit. This is my personal favorite as a librarian. So according to Elicit, it is a research assistant using language models like GPT-3 to automate parts of researchers' workflows. And currently the main workflow of Elicit is literature review. So if you ask it a question, it can show you relevant papers and summaries of key information about those papers in an easy to use table. So I did ask it the following prompt: how does UDL affect student achievement? And it gave me this. So for the left-hand column, it gives you a summary of the top 4 papers, and this option is available in beta. And it's fairly interesting seeing what it states. It says at the bottom, overall, the paper suggests that UDL has the potential to positively affect student achievement, but more research is needed to fully understand its benefits and how to effectively implement UDL strategies. Okay. The other column, the other part of Elicit, gives you the paper titles and authors. And then on the right-hand column, it gives you the abstract summary. So this is a great starting point for students and their research. It's kind of like a better version, in my opinion, of Wikipedia. So if students are just getting started with their research and they want some ideas of where to go and what papers to start with, they can use Elicit. It might be a good starting point for them to work from. And additionally, here is, if you click on one of the article titles, this is what pops up. So it gives me the title, the names of the authors, abstract summary, and then they ask a series of questions about this journal article. And then it does give me the full abstract on the right-hand column. So that's a quick overview of Elicit. So now we are going to move on to Ava. So Ava is a music tool. And so if you're trying to generate music, I'm not super familiar with this tool, but I did want to share about it briefly so you can see what's out there in terms of generative AI. But Ava will help you create music, which is very interesting. And they have options in here, such as choosing a key signature, duration, number of compositions. And so you can actually create tracks based on other tracks that they already have. And then there is also an edit mode, an edit screen in Ava, where you can actually add custom layers, such as if you want to do a voiceover, and you can adjust the melody, chords, bass, extra, percussion, etc. So like I said, I'm not as familiar with this tool, but it's interesting to see what's out there. And they do have an auto mixing tool as well, which is interesting. And this is the song that I asked it to do a tavern music, and this is what it gave me. Okay, so moving on quickly to Gen 2 runway videos. This one, unfortunately, the free plan only gives you 8 seconds of video. So at this point, the tool is not useful for the free version. It is expensive, but eventually once Gen 2 comes out, it will allow text to video. So it'll be interesting to watch this one and see what can be created with it down the road. So real quickly, why should we use generative AI in the classroom? Well, this technology is not going to go away. It's here and it's just going to keep expanding. It's being created and it will become a mainstay in our culture moving forward. So generative AI in general can be used to advance effectiveness and efficiency. And according to an article that Daniel recently shared with me by Schroeder, 1,000 business leaders were surveyed in February by resumebuilder.com. So not a super reliable source, but it's a starting point. They shared that 48% of them had replaced at least some workers with ChatGPT since November. So yes, ChatGPT is replacing some workers, not all workers, and I don't think it'll ever come to that point, but it is replacing some workers. By the end of 2023, 33% of these business leaders said they would definitely lay off workers due to ChatGPT, and 26% said probably. And 92% of them said it was beneficial for job applicants to have ChatGPT or AI experience. So as faculty, I believe it behooves us to teach our students how to use and evaluate these tools, since they'll likely need them in the future workplaces. So just a little reminder and the snapshot preview for the next webinar. Generative AI does have its challenges. For example, what's free today may not be free tomorrow. Free versions are limited and may eventually disappear. These tools are creating new things that you can use, but do be careful. We don't know where they're getting inspiration from, and it may be very similar to copyrighted material. For the chatbots specifically, it's important to evaluate information from them to determine the accuracy and avoid believing those hallucinations that it makes up. So here's a brief list of some of the challenges to be under consideration for ChatGPT specifically. Privacy is a concern. Don't share personal details on it. Hallucinations, so it has ghost sources, makes up sources and inaccurate information. Biases, the date of the content. Plagiarism or academic integrity. And finally, the detection tools and false positives. So there are very many articles, videos, and podcasts available. I did collect some of them in a LibGuide related to AI at briarcliff.libguides.com/AI. And there is some information already from another library, McGill Library. They created an AI robot test to evaluate AI tools, which I will show you briefly as well. And then finally, I have a direct link to ChatGPT here. So I have a lot of time left because I want to show you some of these tools also, but I want to pause here and see if you have any questions at this point. So either feel free to unmute yourself, or you are welcome to put it into the chat if you have any questions at this point in time before I show some of the tools. I'm going to stop sharing right now so I can see some of you if you decide to unmute yourselves. All right, it looks like Soren put something in the chat. Searching for breast cancer information. Some of the answers were made up. Yep, using made up sources. Yes, that is correct. And I've actually used it myself just to play with it and test it out. And it does indeed make up sources. So I asked it for the most current research available in universal design for learning, in higher education, and libraries. And it gave me a list, or I asked for who were the top researchers in that area. And it gave me a list of 10 people, and they were real people. And then I asked it, give me the list of their most recent peer-reviewed articles they've published. It gave me a list, but then I proceeded to look it up and try to find these so-called articles, totally made up. So yes, it will make up ghost stories and it will make up content if it doesn't have an answer. So that is something to keep in mind. And I definitely would not rely on it for medical advice or or tax advice. So don't ask it about taxes. That would probably not be the best idea. All right. Yes.
Bree, just a follow-up. This is Soren. So another thing I've heard about recently is cloning, where people get like a video of someone and some audio, and then they can basically generate a false video or false conversation using that, that clip that they have. Is this technology being used for that? Are they using like ChatGPT or generative AI to do cloning videos too?
It's probably possible, like with Runway 1. I don't believe it's possible at ChatGPT. I think that is just mainly text-based. I haven't tried to make videos from ChatGPT, but I don't believe it has that functionality at this point. But others, if they know something different, can chime in. But while we are chatting, I am going to pull up my screen again for another piece. Okay. So if you have more questions, feel free to ask or put those in the chat, but I do want to pull up some of the resources that I wanted to tell you about briefly before showing you ChatGPT and Night Cafe. So firstly, this is the AI LibGuide that I created. I'll put the URL in the chat as well. All of these link to a lot of different information. So I am not an expert yet. I am learning along with you. I've done a little bit of research and I've watched several webinars, but there's more to learn, definitely. And so feel free to check out some of these resources if you want to dive deeper. So just to show you a little bit, this resource, AI Text Generator Sources to Stimulate Discussion Among Teachers, has a huge list of content. So it has a section on contents or cautions and disclaimers about AI text generators, implications for higher ed, audio, video, and then it just keeps going. So under each of these sections has a lot of links to different articles. So if there's a specific article that you think looks interesting, you can go ahead and click it. Hopefully it's open source and you can read it right then and there. If it's not, you can always try to request it through interlibrary loan and hopefully we can find a copy for you. But hopefully most of them are available openly on the web. For example, here's one, ChatGPT is dumber than you think. So yes, there's a lot of great articles already written about this tool and what its capabilities are. So I definitely recommend just scrolling through some of this, see if any look interesting to you and read some articles about it just to get started and to see what is being talked about for these types of sources. Secondly, here's a Padlet page on AI articles on ChatGPT and education. And they have a section for AI articles, and you can see that it's updated daily. They add to it pretty constantly, and there's a lot in here. So definitely check this out if you want to keep up to date on the day-to-day. If you want to just browse and see what new articles are written about it, you can. They also have sections on policy statements, syllabi, and how to cite, tips for using AI and ChatGPT in higher ed, resource hubs, AI ChatGPT detectors, AI tools, generators, or search engines. For example, I want to check this one out, the best 500 best ChatGPT prompts. That would be interesting to look at. They also have webinars and podcasts. For language teachers, they have additional info, research on ChatGPT and AI, which are starting to appear as of March. And then finally, videos. And again, each of these is a very lengthy column of a lot of information. So if you want to learn more, I recommend checking out some of these sources. There's a lot of information already out here. Then this one I wanted to briefly show you more AI resources specifically related to higher education. So if we scroll down, they have some recommendations of things to consider in terms of staying informed about the latest developments, learning practical applications for your teaching, and of course, considering the ethical implications as well. So they have latest developments here. And there's just a lot of information available already. So take some time if you have time, maybe over the holiday weekend, over Easter, and read through some of this. There's a lot of great information, and I'm always learning something new as well. All right, so now we're going to move on to actually showing you these tools. So this is ChatGPT. This is what it looks like when you've logged in to your account, and you can create a free account with using your Google account or email, etc. So I asked it to write me an essay on information literacy, and this is the same thing that was on my slide earlier, and it gives me my details. Then I asked it, please write it for an elementary school audience. So then it changed some of the language, so it was geared towards elementary aged, although some of the words are still pretty big. And then I asked it, what are some discussion questions for elementary students about information literacy? And it gave me some discussion questions here. So we can use it as faculty ourselves too, for ideas of what we could bring up during class discussions, or even for our discussion boards. And then I said, what are some activities I could have elementary children do related to information literacy? And it gives me some ideas like a scavenger hunt, fact or fiction game, etc. And just as a side note, Rich did ask a question in the chat. Do I know if the AI tools I showed take copyright into consideration yet? Not as far as I know. I do not believe AI tools are worried about copyright at all. So that is definitely one of the challenges to take into consideration for AI. So yeah, it gives me some pretty interesting activity options here. Then I asked about what about activities for college students? And it gives me some examples here: citation exercise, annotated bibliography, source evaluation, etc. Then I said, what discussion forum questions should I use for college students? And it gives me some ideas here. But then to cheat, I asked it, what are answers to these questions from a freshman perspective and from a senior college student perspective, just to see how it would answer from the different perspectives. So it gives me the answers for the first question here. And it just starts it out by saying as a freshman and then as a senior. So it's pretty interesting looking at some of these from the AI's perspective, what the difference is between the freshman versus a senior response to these questions. So I'm not going to go through all of them. There's just not enough time today. And I do want to leave some time for another search or two. And then I asked it, what would ChatGPT Plus mode give me that the free version does not? Just because I was curious, since there is the option to upgrade to Plus now. And it says it's not an actual product or service. It's a subscription tool. And it says, in general, a paid subscription would offer several benefits, including more computational resources, advanced language processing capabilities, customizable models, and priority support. So at this point, it doesn't seem like there's that much going on for the Plus version, the paid version, over the free version, except for priority support and time for using the tool. So for now, the free version is pretty open and openly available. So that's helpful. And down the road, that may change. We don't know. So somebody, if you are wanting, why don't you give me a chat topic? So let's get a prompt to ask ChatGPT so you can see in real time what it might look like. Does anybody have a recommendation? And I know if you're typing in the chat, sometimes it takes a little while to type in your answers. So I'll give you just a moment.
This is Rich.
Sure.
How about, so one of the classes I teach that Jeff has something. Let's go with what Jeff did.
Okay. Make a film review of a recent movie. And we can do another one for you later, Rich, after we try Jeff's if you want. So what movie should we do? maybe Prey, the new Predator movie. Make a film review of Prey. Oh, Wakanda Forever, that's a good one. It probably won't know that one, but it might try to make something up. Okay, let's see what it says. Oh, yeah, okay. So it does fess up that it doesn't know, actually, so that's good. So if you don't want to read, it says, I'm sorry, but as of my knowledge, cutoff date, September 2021, the film Wakanda Forever has not been released yet. And then it goes on to speculate and talk about Black Panther. So, you know, at least it fessed up and said it didn't know. So that's something. And it looks like Perry asked, what is quantum tunneling? Let's put that one in. Okay, so it's giving us a description, talking about classical physics and wave functions, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. But you can see it's going into a fairly lengthy description of what quantum tunneling is, and ending by saying it's fascinating and an important aspect of quantum mechanics, and its effects have wide-ranging implications across many fields of science and technology. So that's interesting. So it does try to use a more conversational tone in its replies as well, which is one of the reasons people are excited about it. Any other prompts that we should type in real quick, or should I move on to show you the next one? Okay, Jeff recommended defining a modern disease. Maybe cancer, because that's a big one. It would be interesting to see how they would define cancer. Maybe let's try that. Oh, let the AI pick. Okay, define a modern disease. All right. Type 2 diabetes, okay. So it's keeps chatting, and you can stop it from generating if you think that's enough information or if you want it to change gears. But I'm going to ask it where it got that information. And as you can see, it's not giving me specific sources here, just talking about its training data. So that is one thing to consider. Any other prompts at this point before I move on to the next tool? And I should mention, the thing about ChatGPT is it's a conversation, so you might want to edit your response. For example, it says this, and then I could say something in response like, what journals are in your training data? I'm not sure what it'll say, if anything. And Perry, you're not going to become increasingly unnecessary. Students for a long time will still need training in how these tools work, even if they can use them to do things that we couldn't do in the past. To me, this is the next calculator. So we're going to use the tool, figure out how to use it, and make our lives a little easier. But then our jobs might adapt a little bit or change, but students will still need training and teaching for even to use these tools and evaluate them. So don't worry about losing your job or anything at this point. That's a long-term down the road type of thing to worry about, I think. Haha. Tim asks, what will humans evolve into? That's an interesting question. And I'm going to stop it from generating anymore. Oh, something went wrong. Okay. Yeah, it cannot predict the future or make definitive statements about what humans will evolve into. And then it's talking about evolution in general and how humans have gone significant evolutionary change. Interesting. Okay. All right. I know there's probably a lot more we could ask it, but I'm going to move on. And I think I'm actually going to open up Elicit as well, because I think it's an interesting tool. Okay, see if I remember my login. Oh, maybe I don't. Okay, I won't worry about Elicit right now then. Okay, so let's look at Night Cafe for a little bit. So does somebody have an image in, or what type of image do we want to have it create for us? Are there any recommendations? And I'll give you just a moment to think about that. Oh, Brian suggested students singing outdoors. That's a good one. I'll type that in a moment. Okay. Students singing outdoors. Okay, and then they have these styles, and we have different options here. So what style do we want it to use? There's a lot of different choices. Epic. Okay, let's see, where is epic? There it is. We'll try epic. All right, and then scroll down. We'll stick with the 4 images for now. Create. And it does take a little while sometimes for it to render. They call it rendering the images. So we will just wait. Oh, that was actually fairly quick. Sometimes it's a little slower than others. So in this case, it brings up these 4 images, and let's just click on each one individually to see what it looks like. Okay, so it looks like there's 3 individuals here. It's kind of hard to tell if they're singing or not. It looks like one has a lantern maybe. Let's go to the next one. And again, it's kind of, you can't really tell that they're singing because it's an image, but they're not really standing like a choir would or anything. So we might want to adjust it a bit, but I would consider the setting to be fairly epic in this case. So in this one, it looks like there's just one individual. So sometimes it's hit or miss depending on the prompt you give it.
Free. How many credits are you willing to use today?
We can use all the ones I have. I created a new account just to show you. I have 7 more.
Can we add to this prompt and see if we can get a image of students singing on a college campus during a spring day?
Okay. Let's try that. And let's try a different style because maybe the epic one is throwing them off a bit. Let's try. Okay, portrait. Where's portrait? Color portrait. Is that the one, Brian, that you want?
Yeah, that's a great one.
Okay, let's try that one. Create.
I wonder if we'll get one student as a portrait.
No, quite a few. Another thing you can put into the prompt is photorealistic. That's what I tend to use because it makes it a little bit more realistic seeming. But yeah, we've got students here. These ones, I can't tell if they're singing or not. These ones, I can't tell what they're holding. They might actually have like music paper and stuff. So that one might be pretty accurate. This one, they look like they're singing. Yeah, so it's fairly accurate, I'd say, maybe.
So are these like actual pictures, or are these just completely computer generated? Like,
supposedly they're completely computer generated, but they use other images in their database to base them on. So for example, I did one, Ray from Star Wars, and it brought up images that looked extremely similar to like the movie posters. So it will, it makes it up and uses its algorithms to create a newly generated image, but it's basing it on real images. And so there are some potential copyright concerns because we don't know where it's getting inspiration from, like I mentioned earlier, and copyright could be a concern depending on how close it is to the original source. And I'm sure Rich and maybe Kristen could talk about some of that as graphic design folks in more detail. But yes, my understanding is it does create the images, but it's based on other images.
Is
We
it
have
me,
one-
or is this kind of creepy looking? Like the picture in the lower left corner looks like a poster for a horror movie.
This one?
Oh yeah, I mean, like if you really
Yeah, if you look in detail, I mean, some of the
It is
faces are
really
not
creepy.
quite normal looking.
Brian,
So-
would you lead that choir?
Oh man, I'm over here just laughing. It's hilarious.
So yeah, sometimes it's hit or miss. My husband uses this tool for creating book covers because he's an author. So sometimes he has to go through a number of different prompts before it'll create one he likes. But yeah, it's very interesting seeing what can be created.
What about a prompt that doesn't involve human faces?
We could do that. What do you want to do? What's a prompt from somebody that doesn't include humans in it?
Maybe something about a boat on a body of water during a lightning storm.
I like that. Any other things to add to the prompt before I hit create? Anyone else want to chime in?
Use a chemistry lab on some chemicals or something, just for fun.
Okay, let's see. A boat with chemicals in it. Or a boat carrying chemicals, maybe. How about that? During a lightning storm, being capsized by a sea monster. Let's try that. Let's see if that does anything. And let's change the preset again for, let's see. Is there a zombie? No, there's not a zombie. Let's try horror. I don't believe they have a Disney filter, no. That would be copyrighted probably. All right, let's see, 4 images again, create. So we'll see what this does for us. Okay, so we do have some boats. It looks like they're capsizing. There are people in some of them. Let's click through and see them. I don't see a sea, that might be a sea monster there in the very small part there. This one I just see 2 ships. Oh, this looks like it might be a dragon, maybe. Let's see what the next one is. I'm not seeing a monster in this one, although there might be something in the distance there. And then this one, it looks like there's a monster made out of water potentially. So yeah, it's interesting. You know, it kind of followed the prompt fairly well, I think. So yeah, this is Night Cafe, and that's what's involved in creating images from AI, generative AI. The third picture reminds you of the George Washington crossing the Delaware. Yeah, I could see it. Thanks, Angela. All right. Does anybody want to do one final prompt of this before I close it out? Okay, that's a good one, Tim. Let's try that. A historian stepping out of a time machine. Let's try that one. And what style should we do for this? Let's do steampunk maybe, because I like steampunk. Let's try that.
I was gonna ask real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Already clicked the button.
I did. but go ahead.
What would be your expectation of the image before we actually see what happens?
Ah, that's a good question to ask students for sure if you want to use this tool.
It's like, what does the historian look like?
Yeah, and what does a time machine look like? In this case, it looks like a train for the first few images. Let's try to zoom in a little. So I don't see a person in this one at all, so they ignored that one. This one, again, I don't see a person. I just see the train or whatever this is. In this one, there is a person, but it looks kind of strange. The face looks a little strange there. I know it's kind of small on the screen. I can actually make, oh no, cancel. And then the last one, again, it just has this device. So maybe I'll change it to not be steampunk. Let's try a different one.
It seems to have picked up most of that from the style, not the actual.
Yes, exactly. Do we want to try anime? We could try anime. See what that does. Okay, interesting. So this one, it looks like there's a person at least, and this might be a time machine, sure. This one, I don't see a person in it per se, but this looks like it could be maybe a time machine that they're about to step out of. And there's a person here, and it does have an anime feel to it. And this one is, I'm not seeing a person or a time traveling machine, but maybe it's in here somewhere in the foreground. All right, so I'm going to close out of this and stop sharing. Stop sharing. Okay. Oh, it looks like Todd put in a chat, Midjourney. Yes, I was going to mention Midjourney does require the Discord server. So if you have Discord already and you're open to trying out a new tool, Midjourney is one that you might want to check out. I personally use Night Cafe just because I don't want to bother with using Discord and trying to get to Midjourney from that way. But yes, Midjourney can be helpful too. And it looks like it's built on Stable Diffusion as well. So thank you, Todd, for adding that. All right, so we have about 9 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to pose to the group or to me at this point? Otherwise, we're looking forward to the next several webinars that we have planned. So yeah, go ahead and ask if you have any questions.
Bree, I don't think you shared your sound when you played. Did you play a clip for us of the?
I did. It was very short though. Sorry, I didn't think to share the sound. Yes.
Oh, that's okay. It would be interesting to hear what it came up with.
Let's see if I can try to pull it up now if you want me to. Let's see if I can go back and do that to the right screen.
So when I asked the question about copyright, I was thinking about the music in particular, because I know music artists are very protective of their tunes.
Here's where I have to share the sound. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to do that earlier. Where are my slides? There they are. Okay. So that was it. I hope you heard that time.
Yep.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it just came up with that when I said tavern music. And Angela says that she noticed yesterday our license of Turnitin has AI percentage now. That's interesting. I'll have to log in to Turnitin. I haven't played with that in a while to see what that looks like. But as I mentioned, sometimes it does do false positives. So just be wary and leery of assuming that that's 100% accurate, because sometimes it will give you false positives. All right. Well, any other questions at this point? And Todd says that apparently 98% correctly identified AI, 4 to 5% false positive rate. So it is getting fairly accurate, which is great to see. But again, don't rely on it 100%. All right, well, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, please do try to attend our future webinars related to AI, because I think there's a lot more to learn and talk about and discuss. So please join us for those future ones as well. And as I mentioned earlier, I am recording the session, so I will make that available in the AI LibGuide. So watch for the slides and the recording there in the future. And you're welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending today's session. I know some of you may have class to get to, so if you need to sneak out, that's fine. I will stay on in case you do have further questions, or if you want to see any of those resources again.
Bree, this is Angie. I have some questions.
Mhm.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this. It seems so big. Am I overthinking it, or is it really bigger than what we assume it to be? How are we going to meet this challenge head on?
I think by learning about it. I think that's the best way to look at it, and to see what's out there currently and what's out there in the works, and just trying to keep up with some of it. I know there's a lot, it's overwhelming, and I was overwhelmed by it at first, but then once I started attending webinars and playing with the tools myself, I felt a little more comfortable with it and seeing what its capabilities are, as well as its challenges, and how to evaluate the information it's giving you. So I think as long as we learn the tools ourselves and possibly incorporate them a little bit into our courses, whether it's to talk to students about it and the challenges with it and how to evaluate it, versus banning it completely from the classrooms, I don't necessarily think is the right approach, but individual professors will have to determine what they're willing to do in their own courses. So it's okay to do it how you think it makes sense for your courses. But it's a big thing. I think it'll get bigger, but I don't think it's going to change life completely. I think we're all still going to be needed, and there'll still be questions, and we're still going to be teaching for the foreseeable future. But we can use the tools however we so choose, and we just have to take it all into consideration and take those challenges into consideration as well, I think.
I just want to add one more thing there. I think that we absolutely need a policy for this, especially when we're dealing with classrooms, and if you want to use in assignments, clear policy to the students would be the best way to keep ourselves sane, in my opinion, and also, well, for the sake of institution.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. And we do have an upcoming webinar related to classroom policies. And also there's some of the information linked on the LibGuide have examples of policies for classrooms that you might want to check out and get ideas from as well.
Right. So the AI workshop series 3, I think, is about the classroom policies. So, yep.
I don't want to monopolize the questions, but I have one more question.
Go ahead.
And this is probably at the very basic level, and that might help me understand better. The AI technology, students are using this to write complete assignments. They're using this to complete their coursework. They're asking the prompt that we are asking the students, and then they're taking whatever the AI produces and turning that in as their work. Is that what we're looking at?
Some of them maybe. Some of them might be using it as a starting point for brainstorming. Some of them might be using it, but then editing the paper before they submit it. Some of them might not be using it at all. So I wouldn't make assumptions as to what our students are or are not doing with it. But it might make sense to talk about it with your students and to ask them if they're using it, how they're using it, and to tell them your expectations on their own work and what they should be doing themselves versus what they can get assistance from the AI with. For example, they could maybe get background research or background ideas of what they might want their topic to be for their research or whatever, but that they ultimately have to write their own paper. So it's up to you how you want to deal with it. And that's why, like Daniel said, the classroom policies are very important moving forward. This semester, it's probably a little too late to think about, because I know everyone's very busy with midterms and getting ready for finals and everything. But for fall, I definitely recommend having a classroom policy ready for your courses.
That's why we're having this workshop series right now, so we can actually use many of this information for the upcoming fall semester.
So actually then on the flip side, if a student was using it to help them research, they could actually use it to find 5 articles and then maybe do some reference mining from there. So there is a positive side to it.
Yes, definitely. But if they're going to do that, I would recommend Elicit because ChatGPT does not give sources. If it does, they are not always accurate. They're sometimes made up. So if you want your students to use it for brainstorming, which I think is a definite good idea, depending on the context, I would recommend Elicit to them. Or at least Perplexity. All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Well,
this has really helped me.
you're welcome. It is 1 p.m., but if anyone has any final questions that I can answer, I'd be happy to try to answer those. I'm happy to stay on an extra minute or two, but I know people do have other classes and things to get to as well. So I want to respect your time also. But if anyone has a final question, feel free to ask. Otherwise, please do try to attend our future webinars. I think hopefully you'll get more clarification during those as well. Okay. Well, you're welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending. And feel free to reach out if you have individual questions by email if you would like, or feel free to stop by the library. I'm happy to chat AI with you in the future. Again, I'm still learning myself, but I'm happy to talk things through with you and try to do some research with you as well.
Hey, Bree, would you send me the link and I'll send out the mass email again?
Sure, and I'll also send you my slides as well, Daniel, if you want to share that. I'm not sure how big they are. I don't think they're huge, so they should be emailable.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording now.